Cool. All right. So it's my first podcast. I'm giant podcast fan. Love it. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Professor Dave Massack. I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I wanted to pay the favor for to help you out. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube channel, and I'm on TikTok doing a bunch of stuff on there, and I just wanted to share it with another sort of outlet for those of you who do podcasts and stuff. I'm giant into podcasts. I was probably one of the first people that I knew of that was doing podcasts back in, it was way back, I think it was like 2007 or something when I started doing podcasts, listening to them. I had never actually been a content creator until the last few years when I started doing the Reciprocity project. So how this all started, this is probably a good place to start with this podcast. I started a app, all right, and I had an idea. I think it was back in 2005 or something like that. I had this idea coming home from Orlando. I was at Disney World with my kiddos, and driving back with two little kids in the back. My mind was wandering, and I thought, wouldn't it be really cool to create this app where people would give freely of their time and effort to help people get feedback on their writing and create kind of like an editing, application, sort of mimic what goes on within peer review in the um, within academia. So I don't know if you know how this all works. So for those of you who are in academia, you're probably really well aware of how this all kind of works. But you write some stuff and then you send it off to get peer reviewed, and people give you tips and hints, and sometimes they'll tell you to completely rewrite something. Actually, that's most of the time they'll tell you that what you're doing is complete BS. But I wanted to mimic that behavior and make it a lot more fun and interesting, and make it automatic, and so that we can get what is basically like citizen science, which I didn't really know that term at the time. It's kind of a fairly new term where anybody can participate and really democratize what science is about, where everybody can participate, but using, basic tools and machines, software to help it along. And so let's say you're a writer and you're writing something and you have this great idea and you write it, but then, you need feedback. It's hard to get feedback on anything. It's really scary, first of all, to ask for feedback. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I created this? So, um, then you ask, instead of asking somebody for feedback, you go to some sort of central website, a central platform. They didn't even call it at the time. Nobody even knew that term, platform. That was kind of a new term. And so go to some sort of website where it will give you feedback, and you don't have to ask for people, because that there's people on it that will actually do it, that want to do it, and so that people are incentivized, kind of like what you see in sort of sharing economy models, all of this sort of car ride sharing type stuff, and all of those kind of things, where people are just freely wanting to do things, but then also create like an incentive structure behind it so people would want to contribute, um, where, like, first of all, it's like free when you sort of go on and want to participate. But then, if you're good enough, the system sort of learns that you're good enough and starts giving you the ability to convert whatever credits that you've earned into cash and to money, so that there's an incentive to participate and do a good job. But also that there's an incentive, for people to want to actually join and be part of this thing. So right now, I built out this platform where, I sort of dwelled on it. So coming back to the car ride, right? It's one of those things where I was like, that's a cool idea on the way home. And I was like, well, why didn't anybody do that? And then I started pondering about it and thinking about it. And, a few months down the road, I was like, I cannot sleep because I keep thinking about this thing, and I think it's a really cool idea. So then I go through all of this effort to try to find a team. I live in Tallahassee. I'm at a very well-known institution in Tallahassee. Many of you know the name. Our football team is not doing great this year, but that's okay. It's been doing great for a few years. But so I was like trying to find a team, asking around, entrepreneurship. I was at the time I was teaching about entrepreneurship, so I thought I'd get sort of students together, or whatever, and maybe some, faculty together, and it just did not work out. It was a complete disaster. So I was like, this is nuts. Nobody's ever going to do this thing, and I'm going to be the one that's going to have to do this thing. Sorry, I'm just drinking my coffee. So I was gonna have to be the one to do this thing. So as I was doing it, I was like, oh man, nobody's doing this. That was about 6 months to a year in at that point where I came to this realization that, um, you know, I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people just suck, and they just won't do things, and they won't sort of see what you're doing, and they're just in it just to make a bunch of money and all that kind of stuff. And so, like with entrepreneurial things, you got to watch out for that because it's not going to make that much money for a long time, because it's not a thing yet, right? So, um, anyways, I gave up on that entire sort of, the stuff that we teach in business school, that sort of get a team together and all that. Just it does not work. Um, so then I started doing it myself, and I convinced my wife, who is an amazing person, to spend some money on getting a contract developer. And I've got this contract developer out of the Ukraine. Um, and I found that person off of, or that group off of Upwork. I thought that they were going to be legit. They actually built the thing, got it out on the internet, and then, that contract developer just kind of like bailed on me after that. So it was kind of like half working. So I had to find another one. I spent a bunch of money on it at that point, and so I found another one out of India, and I've been partnering with them since. It's been wonderful. All the sort of headaches of working with somebody in a different language in a different part of the world, but I've been building out the reciprocity platform for some time now since that was happening. But as I got on the internet, I realized that nobody's paying attention to this thing. Nobody's on it. The internet does not work that way in terms of you put something on the internet and all of a sudden everybody sort of starts paying attention to it. That's a bunch of hogwash. Since I've learned that, like, almost never, ever happens where you do that and it sort of takes off. It's such a rare phenomenon, and that phenomenon that sort of go viral instantly. It only really happened for a couple of things like Facebook, but that was at really early internet days, where the internet was pretty different, because there was not a lot of websites that were out there that were really legitimate. So now that there's a lot of websites, a lot of information that's available, you have to sort of carve out and build a community, an audience, and I started. So, long story short, this is long. So I started, somebody told me, I was like, man, I'm not getting any traction. And they were just like, well, why don't you just do a couple of YouTube videos about it and see if that will work? And I was like, oh, okay. So I started doing YouTube videos with the platform specifically, and got really no traction. But then, Googling around on YouTube of like how to build traction or whatever, and I kind of got a little bit, um, I got. I got a little bit played in a sense where somebody, one of these internet gurus was telling me to, all it took was this and 90 days and all that crap. And so one of the things was just putting out YouTube videos for like 90 days. And I did, and I thought it would kind of grow, and it really didn't. When it grew, but what was interesting, I I ended up putting out YouTube because I was like, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I can't do this thing. So instead of 90 videos, I put out like, it was something like 180. But then I looked at the videos after and I realized which ones were getting traction. It wasn't really about business and, all of those kind of things. But what was really getting traction was about graduate school and not only graduate school, but like dealing with sort of emotions and the challenges of graduate school. So I started putting out a lot more of that kind of stuff. And what it's morphed into is what I've realized with the whole reciprocity project is a huge component is people are really struggling with the day to day and getting up and doing something. And I look back in terms of my graduate school and I look back at being a professor. I mean, it is a really challenging thing. So I started talking more about that and about who I am and the challenges I go through as being somebody that's doing this in academia and doing research, as well as doing something that might be a little entrepreneurial on the side, and just trying to tell that story of how much of a challenge it is and how you work through it and the sort of thought process of getting through it. And it's kind of like mindset, kind of motivational crap, which I never thought that was like a thing. Like I didn't like it for a long time, and I've come to realize it's actually super important um, for a ton of people, but also it's just super important to sort of that upper, just being happy and friendly with yourself and just being like okay. And I realize that is kind of tricky, sort of telling that you know a lot of people struggle with it, and I struggle with it, and I would say I'm pretty good with it. I really would say that I'm actually pretty good with sort of managing that stuff, but it is also a tremendous struggle and it's a tremendous grind. And so if I could tell that story that you're totally you're really normal to have any of these experiences and to go through this, and then B of like, oh man, this is what I've sort of done to deal with it. It's not perfect by any means, but it might be helpful. Hopefully that might resonate with some people, and it sort of captures people. And I'm just kind of like this bumbling idiot, getting to the point of, yeah, I've been moderately successful in a lot of different ways. Worked my sort of way up to become an associate professor, and in a really good school and all that kind of stuff. But um, just telling people that they got it, you got this, and that they're decent people dealing with struggles. Man, that is so important. And I would never have guessed that in a million years. It's sort of where I started to where I am at this moment with this journey. And sort of dealing with this and dealing with the struggles of day-to-day life, where if you're not working, for me, I'm building this app, right? I'm building the sort of reciprocity project and telling that story, but also being like an academic and all that kind of stuff and dealing with academia. But not everybody is like that. People have other things that they are sort of building or doing, or kind of just putting life together, and telling that story and telling people that they're okay when they're doing it. I mean, I think it's super important at this moment, and this is obviously it's probably going to evolve and turn into other things, and maybe as it grows and becomes a bigger thing, the whole reciprocity project becomes something bigger, and as we start adding more people and all that kind of stuff, eventually, my goal is to do this. This is not like a temporary thing, and I think that's where a lot of people get messed up with this kind of stuff. Um, they think in terms of like if it's going to happen in 6 months or a year or even 5 years, but I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to be doing this for 20 years. How can we build how can we build this thing and have people around that are going to be motivated and do things that are fun? And, I just want to just make the world a better place. I know that seems like it's a huge thing, but I know that there's a real big gap there in terms of, you know, researchers and academics and graduate students and that kind of folks that believe in science, strongly believe in science, but that the scientific effort beats you up. Like it really does. It really gets to you. The scientific mechanism is really tough. And yet we've got this outside world that doesn't believe in a lot of science, which is nuts. Growing up, that wasn't the case for me. This is really a cultural phenomenon that's evolved, particularly in the United States. And so we've got this sort of tension of like, how do we deal with this? And how do we get through the day-to-day grind? And so that's where I'm thinking is where this is moving, is that, getting people to be super excited about science and, scientific endeavor, but also, believe in it. But then B, getting people to know that they can do this. And I am there to tell you stories, to walk you through things, to give you as many resources as I can develop and build. I mean, we're at a time and we're at a moment in this world. If you're generous, and that's where I'm sort of seeing this. If you're generous, you can build all sorts of stuff. With contract developers and all this kind of stuff, we can do some really amazing things. But you just have to be generous and actually build this thing. So that's where I'm seeing myself, is being the person that can sort of, build this all together and kind of mishmash it together and be like a bumbling fool trying to do it and just trying to be helpful at the end of the day. And I'm going to try to be there. It's not going to be perfect. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to be frustrated. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to think that this is stupid. I'm going to think this is stupid, but I'm going to keep trying to do it because I think it's important to let other people know that they're decent human beings. It's not them. It's kind of more of the system features, and we can build things to fix some of those system features and give you resources. I'm going to try to be there to help you out. So that's it. That's my first podcast. I just wanted to say thanks for listening. Appreciate everything that you do, and hang in there. I know that you're listening, and you're just good people, and just know that deep down inside, I think everybody are really good people, and we just have to make that shine and make that come through. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Now I got to figure out how to turn it off. Bye.